Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nick and Laura. On today's episode, Nick and I discuss EPR updates for 2023. We talk to Bridget John about International Association for Impact Assessment, Renewable Energy Guidance, and conference planning. And finally, orangutans are the heaviest tree-dwelling animal with an arm span of 7 feet, despite being less than 5 feet tall. There are also 3 subspecies: the Bornean, the Sumatran, and the recently confirmed new species as of 2017, the Tampanuli. And pretty sure Nick just put this near to see if I'd trip it up. You can tell I'm reading this. Either way, that's good stuff. Love orangutans.
Yeah. The cutest. Or can we agree they're the cutest of the great apes? Is that like a, can we?
I don't
Are up there
know.
too.
I don't know that I could make that call.
It is hard. It is hard. They're also very smart. All of them. I don't know if you know this. One of the zoo stories I've heard was, I think it was orangutans actually were checking the locks every night in the zoo just to see if they were locked. They actually made tools to try to pick the locks and would put them in the keyhole knowing that that's how you open it, because they were watching the keepers. And they're like, yeah, we're getting out of here. This is, jailbreak. It's happening. So no thanks for me. I will not be taking care of the primates.
Neat stuff.
Yeah.
Hit that music.
One of our new projects this year is to host an Ask Me Anything. This will be a live session Laura and I host online for career seekers and early career professionals, where you can literally ask us anything, whether it's career advice, how to handle a tough boss, what's your favorite horror movie, whatever it is, we will be there to answer it. We also encourage you to join and share your fun field stories. We want to hear more of these because there's so many good ones. And so please do stay tuned for more info. We'll talk more about it as we get a little closer. We'll hopefully do it here in the next couple of months.
Okay, you ready? First one of the year. We do not have an official sponsor, so it's up to you. Ready? 30 seconds, go.
Okay, are you tired of feeling like you're the man? Guess what? Now we have a new thing called Gut Punch, which is free of charge. Whenever you need to get punched in the stomach, we will do this for you. We have tiers starting from librarian all the way up to knockout fighter. We will destroy you. That's the thing. This is the I can't even do it. The end all be all to getting yourself knocked down a peg. Gut Punch, now available wherever you get your punches.
Nice. I am tired of feeling like the man, so.
That was on purpose. I did that on purpose. But if you would like to sponsor a future episode, head on over to environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and check out our sponsor form for details. Now let's get to our segment. So Laura, what are we looking forward to in 2023? What's EPR? What are we doing? What are our goals for the year?
So yeah, that is a great question. We've had a terrific 2021 and 2022. So it's pretty awesome to be rolling into year 3 with our weekly episodes. And I think, this is the year of engagement, if you will. I think we would like to start getting more engagement. It's us speaking outwards.
Of course.
Like to have some more input and some conversation going. This podcast is all about conversations going with some other people. So I think we want to do an Ask Me Anything, and we want to be encouraging more field stories from people who are not necessarily on the show, but that we can bring onto the show. Yeah.
So wait, what's an Ask Me Anything?
First question, what is an Ask Me Anything? It is a may hear referred to as an AMA, which is not. What's the other thing an AMA is? Like a wrestling thing?
Yeah, it sounds like a wrestling thing, actually, now that you mention it, yes.
Yeah, so it's not that. It is a forum, if you will, where we will show up, whether that's going to be on Twitch or YouTube or wherever, we're still trying to figure out. But we will basically show up live so that anyone who has a question about our guests, about what we do behind the scenes, about how to find a career, how to find a mentor, we can be here to answer those questions. And so that's about it. If someone wants to ask a question about how to play guitar, we can ask Nick that question.
Yeah, or how to tell a joke, anything like that. I mean, gosh, like I say, what is it? The whole point of the show is, right, connecting with people, right? That's the whole thing we want to do. And in the environmental space, We are all unique and different in some ways and very similar in others. And sharing and exploring those is kind of the whole point. We just want to have some fun with it. So more to come, obviously, on that front for sure. But
we will be hosting that. We're intending to do it quarterly. We'll start the first one in April-ish timeframe. Yeah. So just those listening, stay tuned. We will be announcing when that date and what platform it will be on shortly.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like I say, I've actually, so even when I was in Minneapolis for the NAEP meeting we had last time, somebody came up to me and said, hey, you should do a segment on field notes and everyone's stories, not just yours or your guests, like from everywhere. Just ask people for those stories. And I was like, that's a great idea because we're already trying to do that. That is exactly what one of our goals is for the year, is to do literally that. So,
don't tell Nick's ego that we're doing something that he already thought of.
But it was really cool. I was like, yeah, that's exactly
that is awesome.
What we're doing, and me ego? Come on. What is it? But yeah, it was it was really neat because it's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we want to do. And here's people telling me that they want to see it too. So
so that person better submit some stories.
Yeah, he better. But yeah, for sure. And it's kind of a fun thing. We all have great field stories all over, good and bad things happen in the field, funny things happen in the field, silly things, having someone get in front of you, get scared by a turkey and get so scared that you think you're about to die. And then you realize it's just a turkey. There's always stuff like that. So we really do want to hear more of those stories. So we'll be reaching out more and more to get more of those stories. We'd love to read them on air. We'd love to, laugh and enjoy some really fun moments. So yes, more to come on that too, but that'll be all over our socials. We'll be pushing that and plugging it.
Where can people submit their field stories to us now?
Well, like I say, we're looking for we want to see the hashtag field notes. So anywhere you have social media of any kind, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, if you have hashtag field notes, we'll search for it. We'll find those stories and we will share them. LinkedIn, I'll be posting some of my own stories on that platform as well. So please feel free to give us some other ones. We want to hear from you guys. You can even email us directly. If you go to the www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com, you can actually email us your stories and we would love to read them, give you some credit for the story and read it on air. That would be really fun. We would really enjoy that. So lots of different ways to engage, lots of different ways to do that. So yeah, a lot more coming on that front, but very, very exciting stuff. So
yeah. And lastly, I think the thing to say is, Happy New Year. I'm excited for 2023 and we still need more volunteers. We got a lot of stuff we want to do. So if you are an emerging professional, even a seasoned professional who has time, if you want to get involved, this is a great way to make connections. Both of the volunteers that we had last year have jobs, full-time, amazing jobs. So just saying, this is how you get jobs, not by applying to things, but by volunteering and getting in an area with other professionals.
Yeah, that is actually a great point. Every volunteer we've had has a job. That's great. Really cool. Yeah. So anything else? I think we pretty much covered it.
No, I think you and I need to go and work on our intentions for the year and then get back to interviewing.
All right. Well, let's do that. Let's get to our next interview.
Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Bridget John, Chief Operating Officer and currently the acting CEO with the International Association for Impact Assessment, or the IAIA, on the show. Welcome, Bridget.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much, Laura.
We're super excited to have you here. Our partnerships are a really fun part of doing EPR, and we're excited to bring IAIA into the EPR mix. And for those listening who might not realize, EPR is sponsored by the NAEP, the National Association of Environmental Professionals, and the IAIA is sort of an international counterpart. Is that fair to say, Bridget?
Yeah, I think that would be very fair to say. There's lots of national environmental organizations around the world that we work with. And so absolutely, I think that's a fair assessment.
Awesome. And how long have you been with them?
I have been with IAIA for 23 years.
Wow. So you're used to saying the acronym.
Yeah, there's a bit of alphabet soup that goes along with the organization. You toss in IDB, Inter-American Development Association, or Inter-American Development Bank, and World Bank, and IFC, International Finance. Like there's just an acronym soup. So
yeah. Speaking of, how did you become both the CEO and COO at the same time?
Well, we're in a bit of a transition period. And previously, I was the deputy executive director, and we had an executive director. And now with our new search for a leader, they decided to shift the titles. And so it will be a CEO and COO role. And so they moved my deputy executive director role to the COO role and handling operations. And so until they find a CEO, I'm the acting CEO.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility, especially with an organization of your size. So what all is involved with your role?
Well, we are a very small staffed organization. Once we have a CEO, we'll be back up to 8 again. And so we all wear many hats, as do a lot of small nonprofit staffs. And so I do marketing and communications and sponsorship, the finances, the budgeting, accounting, human resources, and now taking on some of the oversight to some of those projects our previous executive director worked on. So that's probably me in a nutshell.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah. I'm sure there's like a bunch of things that you didn't mention either. And tell us more about IAIA and the kind of benefits that it offers.
Sure. So IAIA, the International Association for Impact Assessment, is a membership organization with members around the world in 120 countries. And so it really provides a lot of networking for our members who work in the environmental field, but it's very interdisciplinary. And so people might be working in the health impact assessment field or social or biodiversity or public participation. And they might be working in the government sector. They might be working as a consultant. So they might be organizations that are requiring an impact assessment. They might be a consultant who's been commissioned to do an impact assessment. They might be from a community, a civil service organization who is being affected by, some kind of project. And so they're so broad and diverse. And so bringing these people together really allows them to have some out of the box thinking, because sometimes there's solutions they might come up with in the biodiversity fields that might apply in, say, social, or a country, maybe in Africa and a country in Asia, and they may be doing things differently and would never have thought of that. And so then they can learn about that. So we do have an annual conference each year that's moved around the world, and we have a lot of publications, best practices and fast tips on our various different aspects of impact assessment so people can get some quick information, webinars, training opportunities. We've branched into online training. And so we're really just focused on improving the practice of impact assessment worldwide so people can make better decisions.
That's great. That's awesome. You've been with them for a long time. So has the organization itself changed? You mentioned having online courses now. What kind of things have you seen over the years, and where do you see it trending?
Yeah, great question. Well, thank you, COVID. As awful as that was, there are some bright spots that came out of that. And I think we would have gotten to online training courses eventually. We do offer training courses as part of our annual conference. So there's always either 1 or 2 day courses, probably 10 to 12 of them offered each year with our annual conference. And we did have one online mentoring kind of training course, like a 3-month course where they're paired up with a trainer and they go through that, a very basic kind of intro level foundations course, which has done really well. So I think we would have gotten to converting to online training courses eventually, but COVID forced our hand, which was a good thing. And so we've taken some of our trainers who have been offering courses at our annual conferences and asked them if they were willing to do them online. And so we've been really growing that in the last couple of years. It's certainly not where it's going to be, but we're getting there steadily. And we're excited to be able to do that because our training courses offered for the conference are restricted to some degree to the people who can afford to get to those conferences. Right. And even though we do move our conferences around the world so that it's not a huge expense for everyone every time. Hopefully it's in your backyard at some point in a 5 to 7 year time span. It's still cost prohibitive, especially, for people in more developing countries where it could be a year's worth of salary. And so being able to offer these online training courses is really we see that as part of our capacity development and improving the practice and being able to expand our reach. So that's, I think, will continue to grow. We're also, I mentioned our training, that's a mentoring program that's more long-term. And we're in the process of expanding that to different content. So this one, what we have is foundations, but we're also looking to add one on the topic of social impact assessment and another one on involuntary resettlement. So we're looking to take a really successful program and add to that. As always with nonprofits, it's we do what we can with the staff and resources that we have. And so there's lots of things we would love to do, but we are looking forward to, with our new CEO, one of their main goals and objectives is outreach, things that we haven't been able to have time to do as much as we're focused on the operations and continuing to offer those products and services and networking that our members love, but to expand on partnerships and projects. And so we're hoping that we're optimistic that we'll be able to offer even more in the years to come.
Yeah, well, that's just all really great stuff. And I love hearing you talk about it too. We've already kind of alluded to the fact that each country tackles environmental policy in very different ways in lots of different layers, right? Like even socially, there's different things in different countries. So how do you go about developing a program that addresses policy needs of so many different countries coming from so many different places?
Well, our conferences are very member driven. So our members kind of take care of developing that. So it's a bottom up process for our conferences. And so people are submitting abstracts on those kinds of things, on what's going on in their country and what their case studies are and their lessons that they've learned. And so our conferences usually have 80 plus countries represented at any given year. And so that automatically makes it very diverse. And so those kinds of things come up as part of the program organically. But it would be almost impossible for us as a small staff to try and keep track of everything going on internationally. But our members are so well connected that they are able to do that and share that information.
Yeah, which is really, that makes a lot of sense. And that's really great. It's using the power of the group to do what you want. So in terms of international policy, right? So in the US, we have, NEPA that drives what we do. Are there some of those really unique, and maybe you don't have to give me a specific country, but really unique policies or anything that's really interesting to you that you are seeing come up in different places and being like, wow, this is a really great way of tackling an environmental challenge?
That's a great question. I'm not so sure I have a good answer for that. I know that they're constantly developing things and working operationally. I don't personally keep tabs on all of the policies. I do know that the government of Canada has recently redone their Impact Assessment Act. And so that's been, in terms of trending, we've seen a lot of discussion about that in our conferences, particularly since our last conference in 2022 was in Vancouver. It was heavily represented by Canadians there, but we have seen a lot of talk about that. And also the multilateral development banks. Now, this isn't national policy, but they're constantly revising their safeguards and standards and guidelines. So like the World Bank's European Investment Bank, there's so many, but they are keeping up to date on those and providing that kind of guidance for our members, and always have something interesting, and using our conferences to get feedback from our members to help feed into that process too.
Yeah. And, it leads me to another question I have for you. Like, for somebody or a company is looking to do more international work, right? So aside from joining IAIA, do you have any other advice for those trying to break into that industry?
I suppose there's a lot of consultancies that work internationally. And so if they were to find one of those that does work internationally, as opposed to some that are more focused on national types of issues. So working with an international consultancy would probably provide some opportunities through that organization to work internationally. Working again with the multilateral development banks, if they wanted to work with the World Bank, for instance, they have people located all over the world working on all sorts of different projects, and they have regional offices. So that would also be another possible way to get into the international scope.
Yeah. Perfect.
They can also attend your conference coming up this year in Malaysia.
That's true. Yes. So they don't have to be a member. You're right. So Nick, outside of becoming a member, they don't have to be a member to attend our conference. So thanks, Laura, for that plug. So yes, it will be in Kuching, Malaysia in May, early May.
That's really cool. That's where
I would start.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, you talked about offering guidance to countries around the world. And one of those areas that's really, really growing is renewable energy. IAIA is doing some of that guidance already. So what are you guys doing? What are you working on?
I'm glad you asked that, Nick. Thank you. So we have within our organization several sections, so special interest areas. We are, as I said, very interdisciplinary. And one of our special interest areas is climate change. And our climate change section is very active, has an action plan. And part of that action plan is on developing a strategic environmental assessment guidance for the renewables sector. And that includes the decommissioning of coal plants as well. And so we have received some funding from the government of Canada. The International Finance Corporation also provided some funding. And we do have additional funding to continue from Asian Development Bank, the government of Norway. And so we have some consultants some of our members who are working on that project to develop both just starting off with just an overview of SEA for renewables energy, but then also some sector specific SEA guidance. And so I know that they plan to be working to have drafts available before our conference in Kuching, and they're having a session there to discuss it with our members and the delegates there. Then some workshops as well. And then our third phase of it will be to get that out to countries. And we as II certainly can't be the vehicle for that, but we plan on partnering with a lot of some of our agencies that we've worked with around the world. We can't tell governments what to do, but some of our partners have some more of that influence. And so we're really excited about that. It's probably a 5-year project and we're in year 2, but we expect to have some pretty solid guidance by the end of 2023.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. That's a newish project for us.
That's great. It's nice to see the evolutions and having organizations like yours who are providing this information. You mentioned having members all over the world and in 80 plus different countries. Do you have many members in the US compared to like some of the other countries like England or something, or Canada? Or does NAEP kind of handle the US section? No,
we definitely.
As a counterpoint, 2 different things.
We definitely have members in the United States. At one point, we had Canada and the United States were pretty equal in terms of membership back when I first started. Now, Canadian membership has exceeded US membership. And we've seen the government of Canada is much more supportive of some of that environmental policy. When we've had conferences in the United States, getting support for those conferences has been a lot more challenging, sadly. And of course, that changes by administration, as is no surprise to any of us. Right. But we definitely have a very strong contingent of United States members. In fact, usually when we attend our conference, attendance is usually the host country or region. Canada and the United States are usually the top 3 represented there, no matter where we are in the world. So
awesome. Yeah. So our listeners can join both.
Yes,
especially
absolutely.
If you have an international company, or if you're looking to be an international company, right?
Absolutely.
So one of the fun ways that NAEP and IAIA work together is, in the last couple of years, is the Environmental Professionals Day, which is April 15th for the last, I think it's 3 years, right?
It's 3, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll be doing that again this year, I assume. And I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. And then, I don't know, we can jam a little bit about how we can maximize that this year and start planning that early. I think we're usually like, hey, it's April 1st, time to move.
Yeah.
Probably.
I love it.
Probably. Yeah, we were very excited. NAEP reached out to us and asked about this idea, and we were all for it. We think it's a fantastic way to recognize environmental professionals around the world in whatever capacity that they are working, that makes the world a more just and sustainable place for us all to live in. And so I know our communications specialist, Jack Marsden, has been working very closely with NAEP over the last couple of years. And so 2020 was our very first. And so I anticipate it going forward. And so I know we've already begun talking a little bit, just a little, about April, because that's right before our conference. And so we need to do some advanced planning even further ahead, because April right before that is just crazy for us. So we do need to start thinking. So let's jam. But we did talk about how just recently I talked to Jack about maybe we could find some of the testimonials that people put out last year, because we encouraged people to thank an environmental professional and put out something with that hashtag and tell us about what they're doing in their job. And so going back and finding the hashtags and the things that were mentioned, and maybe start that promotion early as some examples of, here's who was thanked last year, like teasing out some of that and encouraging people, giving them examples of what that might look like. And so that they might be interested in thanking their own environmental professional and what they're doing. So yeah, we all for it. 100%. Let's start promoting it early.
Yeah. I love that idea though. That's a really good idea.
So we were very thankful that you guys suggested this. So kudos to you guys for having the idea. And we are very appreciative that you reached out to us to partner on that. So we hope it becomes bigger and bigger every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we got to give props to Betty Dehoney, the past
for sure.
NAEP president, because I'm pretty sure it was sparked with her.
I think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So yeah, shout out to Betty.
Kudos to Betty.
We talked a little bit about planning conferences. And so I was fortunate enough to help coordinate the NAEP's conference in Fort Lauderdale last year, and the two previous pandemic ones, which, you talk about shifts, right? Like, it's like, oh, we're going to sit in our house and watch. Okay. And so there's obviously there's some challenging things that came with COVID, and then coming back from COVID. But for, it's hard enough to do nationally. What are some of those challenges for hosting internationally, and how do you handle them? It's got to be an exponential. It feels like an exponential amount of work.
Well, there certainly are challenges. One of them would be visas, invitation letters, and passports, and depends on the country that we're going to each year. We try to work with the embassy locally to try to expedite those as much as we can, and encourage all of our attendees who are participating and registered, who might need a visa to go to that country, to do that early, because depending on, it could take 2 to 3 months to get your visa, and then they might have registered and then not be able to come. So that's something that might be unique for an international event. And some countries are more restrictive than others, unfortunately, and maybe this will change, but the United States would be a tough place for us to have a conference and get people in. People have asked us about having a conference in the US, and we're like, in the current climate, that's a little tricky right now. So that's certainly a challenge. And that's probably the biggest one in terms of international. But, we work with a local committee. So even if there is a language barrier, we do have a local team on the ground that's helping us liaise with the venue, help us to find good technical visits and find good providers for bus transportation or those kinds of things. So we do work with a local team, which is invaluable for us. So those are two ways that we kind of help overcome some of those international challenges.
Yeah. Well, how do you handle the language barrier? I mean, that's got to be pretty challenging.
Well, all of our conferences are hosted in English. So the conferences themselves take place in English, with the exception of the fact that depending on where we are, we will sometimes have like a day within the program, like a stream where there'll be 4 sessions or so that are held in the local language. And if we can get funding, then we provide translation services for that. So we do try to do that, because we don't want to be English centric. And that's also not helpful to building our mission. Like, you don't have to speak English to do impact assessment, and we want to do what we can. as a sidebar, we do have a lot of our publications that are translated into various languages, Mandarin, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian. So we do try to help that way. So we do have some aspects of the conference, the program itself, in another language on occasion. In terms of conference planning, fortunately, that hasn't really been too much of an issue. We've been able to work with people at the venue who speak English. The contracts that we've signed with the venues have been in English. There have been occasions when we do have someone on staff who's a native from Guatemala. And so we have utilized her Spanish speaking expertise on many occasions to help with some of that. But that's what we have the local team for, is if we need to get some clarity around some of those things in a foreign language.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. And I really hadn't thought about the visa challenges too. That's really, really, really interesting. Well, now it's time for field notes. This is the part of the show where we talk about our memorable moments about our guests doing their jobs. So we are asking also for people to start sharing their stories with us using the field notes hashtag. So please do #field notes. Tell us your stories. But Bridget, you have a little bit of a different background here working with the conferences, but you still have a lot of really fun stories. Do you have any silly moments from your conferences you want to share?
Yeah, there's probably more than I can even remember that I've already blocked out. But I mean, fortunately, we work with our staff is so good, and we have conferences, we've worked out a lot of kinks over the years, but we're also, because of that, we're pretty good at acting, thinking on our feet, and have had a lot of challenges, that we've overcome, which is probably why I don't remember them, because our team is so good. So props to them. But we had a conference in Africa where it was kind of open because it's good weather, right? So we had a rooster walking around inside the conference venue and crowing, and couldn't quite catch it. And the power,
of course,
no, and the power went off in the middle of our annual general meeting, and so the slides were down. But our members are very, it's like a family. Impact IAIA is very much like a family. And people have said that over the years. And so, you can go to a conference and meet the people who wrote the textbooks that you studied from in college, and they're just happy to help you, and just very open. And it's like a family reunion every year. And so it wasn't this awkward moment, like people just went with it. So we have had, power outages, and we had, when we went to Chile, there was an earthquake just days before we were set to arrive, which caused everybody to panic a little bit. And actually the first day I was there were some aftershocks while I was sleeping in my bed. So from the Midwest, Minnesota, having spent almost all of my life here, that was my first earthquake, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. We had an airline strike once in 2004 when we went to Canada. So we had people concerned about getting home. Yeah. So, and an embarrassing moment, I will confess, I found myself doing the very stereotypical thing of speaking to someone at a conference in a Latin American country, and they were doing their best to speak in English. I know very limited Spanish. And I found myself, as I was talking to them, getting louder and louder, which is like so stereotypical. And my colleagues called me on it afterwards, like, did you realize you were like, as if speaking louder is going to help them understand me any better? Right. Oh dear. So there are some of those moments.
I love it though. Yeah. We all have them for sure.
Right. That's great. And it's great to be able to just I did that.
That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. I should know better, but,
Right. Yeah.
All right. So let's turn to your hobbies. I love that you mentioned that you are known as an international fan of chocolate. So I need to know if you have any favorite kinds, or if maybe you just think there's one best maker in the whole world.
Well,
if you just love them all, I think I kind of fall in that bucket.
I do. Although as when I was a kid, those little tiny candies that came out at the holidays that you would get that were super cheap. Like, I do have a sense of, if I'm going to spend calories on chocolate, I want it to be, decent chocolate. Not those super cheap ones wrapped with Santa Claus or whatever that come in a big bag. Personally, Cadbury is my favorite.
Oh,
Although I do enjoy Lindt and Ghirardelli as well, but Cadbury is my favorite. We were actually coming home from a conference in Morocco and had to overnight in London. And when we walked into our hotel up to our room, we passed a vending machine that was 100% Cadbury chocolate. I'd never seen a Cadbury vending machine before.
oh,
And
that's
my
so
colleagues
funny.
still remember me, shrieking in delight. Like that was a big deal for me.
Right.
That's awesome. I love it.
Oh,
And also, I guess this is a hobby of yours, judging the high school speech meets. But as environmental professionals, many of us have to give presentations or to speak in public at any given time, and sometimes quite often. So I was curious what kinds of things that you are judging people on there.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, in the speech meet, the competitive speech, it all depends. There's, I think, depending on the stage you're in, it's different categories. And so the one I was in high school was storytelling, which you need to make character voices and try and make yourself look like them. So that I'm judging something differently on storytelling. Like, can they make a good witch voice? Is it convincing? Do I believe that they're a witch? And is this a convincing old man? So that's a totally different judge situation than if I was judging them on a speech to inform, where they're telling me about the history of the potato and what that role is. They're informing us about all of this. So eye contact is always important, not rushing and pausing. I, to this day, will put notes at the top of my speech that say slow, because I have a tendency to speak too quickly, especially at international conferences. It's hard to remember that because we do have non-native English speakers. And I think of that all the time, that sometimes it's difficult for me to understand. But when you have someone who is sitting, who's maybe a non-native English speaker from Japan, trying to understand a non-native English speaker from Colombia, then, that might be even more challenging than it is for me. And so it can be really exhausting. So speaking slowly, speaking clearly, using facial expressions and hand gestures so that it's not so boring. And presentations too, like those are helpful, but don't read your script. A lot of the people at speech meets have them memorized already, but to be able to speak in a way that doesn't sound like you're reading anything. So, notes, not writing out your script, but giving yourself some notes and practice, which we all know, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. I mean, that's speaking my language right there. I love doing that exact kind of thing. Just, reminding you, and it's hard for me. It really is hard for me to go slowly. Nick, slow down. I remember, speaking of, failures, I remember talking to an exchange student and talking about how I couldn't understand Spanish. I wanted to, but they talk very quickly. And she's looking at me, and then I realized that I talked 1,000 miles an hour. I just whoosh right through it. It's definitely a real thing. I love that, though. Just the word slow.
Yeah. And I'll even write it like SLO, like really big and slow, like anything that I can do to make that helpful. But because I just forget all the time because I speak so quickly. So,
right.
And my eye contact, I tend to flit amongst people. And so to try and conscientiously look at each person for a full sentence and then move to the next person, it's still a struggle. But otherwise, you just kind of look like it's hard to make it as meaningful when you're just kind of flitting on the eye contact and not looking up at the ceiling. I tend to do that too. You kind of raise your eyes to the ceiling, even if you're making contact with everyone, and then your eyes go up. And so it's a struggle. And practice in the mirror and practice recording yourself, because sometimes you have habits you don't even know you have, or someone can tell you that you have them. For instance, I blink my eyes all the time and I'm constantly doing that. And so I have to really struggle with that. So if someone could tell you that you have that habit, but until you see it, you really don't, it's harder for you to correct it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you could do stand-up comedy now. That's the exact advice that I would give.
Comedy, not so much. Stand-up speaking, yes. But I don't think, unless you want like dad jokes or something.
Hey.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
There's always a market
enough of those.
I can look those up and tell them, but yeah, I'll leave the comedy to you.
Well, that's really great advice, though. It genuinely is. Like, I love the idea. Seriously, record yourself. It sounds silly, but you'll pick up on it. I actually used to have a tick where when I wanted to change topics, I would go, and I would just do that. I would make that verbal noise. And I was like, what am I doing? You hear it and you're like, okay, I can stop that. But as far as like, looking to the future here, looking forward, what does your 2023 look like? So you got the conference coming up in May, and then what else is on the horizon for you at IAIA?
Well, we, of course, as has been mentioned, we'll have a new CEO. And so we'll be working on a new strategic plan. We've kind of put that on hold. We were supposed to have one come out late last year, but we felt it made a lot more sense to wait until the new CEO was on board and got to know the organization and had a vision for where we should go to grow the organization. And so we are really looking forward to new partnerships, new membership growth, ways to make IAIA meaningful and a bigger reach to others. We do have a symposium on the horizon potentially. And so we're working to develop that. It won't be in 2023, likely early 2024, potentially. Mm-hmm. We're also developing our new, as I mentioned, our mentorship, it's called our Professional Development Program, or PDP program, that we currently have foundations. We are expecting to launch the new social impact assessment one toward the end of this year and are really looking forward to that growth. We'll be reaching out for new online training courses. So we do have some that have repeated, and we will be looking to offer new online training content. And we'll be announcing soon the location, I believe, of II24. So I can't release that yet, but somewhere exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. We're just waiting an official site visit. It's pretty much a done deal, but once that site visit comes back as good, then we can announce that. So, and then we'll be beginning planning for that, almost immediately. Like, we're starting to work on the call for papers and the sponsorship opportunities brochure, and they'll be presenting in the conference in Malaysia and inviting everyone to come. So if you are interested in IAI and presenting and getting some international exposure for your work, we usually open the call for session proposals early in the summer. So probably June, I believe. And then the call for papers would be a few months after that. So we would certainly welcome you all. I know you don't know yet where 2024 will be, but once we do, please consider doing that. Or maybe you want to submit a proposal for a training course that we will be offering there as well. So maybe you've got some experience in something like that and want to offer training. We'd love to have you.
That's great. That's really cool. That's a good 2023 for sure. I want to ask you at least one impossible question before we go. But you've seen the world, right? You've seen a lot of the world. I don't know how many countries you've been to, and I'm sure it's definitely not zero, right? So
correct.
What do you love seeing about the world, and what advice would you give for those who are trying or just now starting to really see other countries?
That's a good question. So going back to my hobbies, I guess, I do enjoy seeing what kinds of candies are out there that are different from what we have in the United States. That's kind of an interesting little thing that I do. And I bring back those candies for my kids and my family members, because it is interesting to see what is out there and different. But I do really enjoy seeing how things are done differently. I like talking to people about their holidays and how holidays are celebrated differently and what holidays are different. But just soaking it all in. I love to walk around the town and not just the touristy aspects, but the architecture and how people, live on a daily basis. Even in the United States, I'd like to do that as well. It's just like walking around San Francisco is very different than walking around Fargo, North Dakota, or in Minnesota. There's, it's just different. DC. So trying to connect with people, which is also great. And I know you can't always do this when you're just traveling, but our conferences are great for that because we are getting to work with our local hosts. And so it's not just a matter of seeing things and doing things, but talking to those people as well. So I do have that benefit that I love in getting to know those people. So, and the second part of your question was advice?
Yeah, for anyone who's trying to do exactly that. So if you're trying to go out and talk to people and meet them, really learn about the place that they're in instead of just going, oh, look at that. That's neat. How do you really, connect with people? What's been your best way of doing that?
That's a good question. Most of the people that I connect with do happen to be conference delegates. So I get some of that when I'm traveling organically. So I suppose probably, coffee shops, just asking questions of people. I think people genuinely are interested in sharing about who they are and where they live if you show a genuine interest in that and asking about that. So people love to talk about themselves and who they are and where they're from. And so just being genuine and asking those questions, I think.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it is a perfect segue. And thank you for that setup, because now I'm going to ask you about where you live. So Nick actually wrote this question asking if everyone always asked you about the movie, but I would guess that might be becoming less, because I know people like Sam don't know anything about Fargo from a movie. She's already like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
And the TV series.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So what's the number two? Like, the number one reason to visit Fargo is to check out something you saw in a movie. But the number two, what does the area have to offer? What do you like about it there?
Well, that's a good question. And I have to admit, I have not seen the entire movie Fargo. I have not seen the series at all. I know enough to say that, well, you will find some people who do talk like that with that kind of accent. It's not, I don't think I sound like that, but maybe that's just me. But I do find myself saying, a lot. Sorry. But I haven't seen the movie Fargo, and I probably should one of these days, because you're right. That is a big question. The second question is, how in the world did an international association end up in Fargo?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing, I live in Minnesota, grew up in Minnesota almost all of my life. And I just crossed the Red River, which is one of the very few rivers that flows north up to Winnipeg. Oh, right. And so I live on the Minnesota side, and I cross into work to the North Dakota Fargo side. The Minnesota side, I love the lakes and the rolling hills once you get out of kind of the valley where we're in. And that's where I grew up, was just a lot of lakes and recreation and the trees. North Dakota has some spectacular things to see as well, especially in the Badlands, Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the bison. I did, not when I worked at IAIA, but when I worked at another organization in Fargo, I was asked by someone who called on the phone, so do you have bison just roaming the streets in Fargo? No. And I was actually asked about polar bears once. And I'm like, no, we're not quite that far north.
Oh, goodness.
That's great. I was telling you earlier, I did that road trip. On the way out, we went south of you, but on the way back, we did come back through and we went to the Teddy Roosevelt National Park, which was a wonderful, little hidden gem.
Yes, absolutely.
I didn't expect that to be even exist or be there. I thought I was all proud of myself. I'm like, oh, I've been to all these national parks. And then I learned how many there actually are. Like, wow, I haven't been to very many.
You have a lot more to go.
Yeah.
Same.
Well, gosh, I was just in Fargo. I was literally in Fargo, in October. Really? And I'm so upset that we didn't talk before that.
Oh yeah.
I know. It was my first time too.
What brought you to Fargo?
We had a meeting in Minneapolis, and I was like, I've never been to North Dakota. Let's do it. So I just wanted to go, and I was like, Fargo is right across the border. So yeah, I didn't ask anyone any movie questions. Don't worry.
There is a chainsaw version of the Statue of Marge in the historic Fargo Theater. So it's a statue of Marge that's carved with a chainsaw. So a wood chipper Marge kind of looks like a wood chipper. And we do have the wood chipper, I believe, in our Convention and Visitors Bureau. So maybe Laura's question about what would people want to see in Fargo, what would bring you there? Maybe that's a good question for Nick. What did you see? What did you do while you were in Fargo, since you wanted to go to North Dakota?
What can I say on this show? No. So I actually was like, I wanted to see, because I always think breweries are kind of like a good mix of where people go and hang out. And so I tried to do a little bit of, food and a little bit of brewery as well. So I remember the names of where I went? Not right now because I'm on the spot, but yeah, I had a great time. I was just really enjoying, getting to hang out with people that were there and just having conversations. It was a lot of fun. And that's really all I wanted to do. I'm not usually a go look at a monument kind of person. I'm usually like, let's go hiking and let's go talk to people and see what's going on,
Fantastic.
So those things were really fun. That's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. That's what we love about this podcast is we get to meet new people and make new friends all over the world and especially in the country. But we are running out of time. This has been a lot of fun and it's been great learning more about IAIA. But is there anything else you want to talk about before we let you go?
Well, just that I hope to have people check out our website. It's not just publications and resources specific to international impact assessment, but everything that we've got on there, best practices on how to do impact assessment would relate nationally as well as internationally. So I think sometimes people might think, oh, I'm not working internationally, so what do they have for us? But all of our publications are out there free, guidelines, best principles. We do have a journal, and some of those are available to non-members as well, some of those publications. So please check out our website, even if you don't work internationally. I think there's a lot there, and there's some that might be useful to share, with clients who don't know what impact assessment is. There's fast tips that will tell you in 2 pages, what is biodiversity impact assessment all about? And why do we need to talk to Indigenous people? Why is that important? So yeah, check us out.
Yeah, very cool. Sounds like that might be a great resource just for people who are exploring career options as well and places
Absolutely.
to study. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And then final question, where can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can check out our website. It's www.iaia.org. And my email is bridget@iaia.org. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Bridget John.
Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
That's our show. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us today. And please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.